Settle in. Let the world around you fade for a while before we settle completely into tonight's exploration. Take just a moment to like the video and subscribe only if you truly enjoy the content shared here. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating. Now, what we're about to explore is not the grand sweep of Roman law, the famous legal codes, or the dramatic court cases. This is something quieter, stranger. It's the small rules, the odd regulations, the peculiar customs that structured the daily lives of ordinary Romans. Laws and customs shape behavior in ways we rarely notice. They determine what we wear, how we greet each other, and where we can go. In Rome, these regulations extended into corners of life we would consider intensely private. They governed hairstyles and dinner parties and funeral processions. They dictated who could wear certain jewelry, who could ride in carriages, even how much one could spend on a meal. For the people living under these rules, they were simply the framework of existence, annoying sometimes, occasionally beneficial, mostly just there. But examining them now, we can see how profoundly they shaped Roman experience, how they created the particular texture of daily life. So let yourself relax into this exploration. There is no urgency here, no crisis to resolve, just the patient unfolding of how small regulations created a world that was recognizably human. Let's begin. In 18 BCE, Emperor Augustus passed a law. It fundamentally altered how Romans dressed, entertained, and conducted their private lives. The Lex Julia regulated social behavior. How many guests at dinner, fabrics by class, and theater seating. It dictated how much gold a woman could own, and if a man could remain unmarried past a certain age. These weren't abstract principles. They were enforceable regulations with real penalties. Informers reported violations for fines. Social advancement was blocked and inheritances limited. The state, through these laws, reached into homes, wardrobes, and intimate life decisions. This was Rome, a civilization of art, literature, and engineering. Yet, it micromanaged daily life in ways intolerable to modern sensibilities. The rules were everywhere, often contradictory, sometimes bizarre, and absolutely inescapable. This is where ordinary Romans lived. Morning in Rome began with decisions that were never entirely personal. What to wear was not simply a matter of preference or comfort. It was a declaration of status, carefully regulated by law and rigid custom, visible to everyone you encountered throughout the day. The toga was the most obvious example. This voluminous, semicircular garment, requiring several yards of wool and considerable skill to drape properly, was the formal dress of Roman male citizens. Not slaves, not foreigners, not women citizens. Wearing a toga in public was both a right and, for certain occasions, an obligation. Appearing in a forum for legal business without a toga could result in being turned away. Attending certain religious ceremonies improperly dressed was an offense against the gods and the state. But the toga itself came in variations, each signaling something specific. The asterisk, toga virilis, asterisk, plain white wool, was standard for adult male citizens. The asterisk toga, pretext to asterisk, bordered with a purple stripe, was reserved for magistrates and for freeborn boys until they came of age. The asterisk, toga candida, asterisk, bleached, brilliant white, was worn by men campaigning for political office, from which we get our word candidate. The asterisk, toga pula, asterisk, dark-colored, was for mourning. And the asterisk, toga picta, asterisk, purple and embroidered with gold, was reserved for generals celebrating triumphs and, eventually, for emperors. Getting these distinctions wrong was not merely embarrassing, it could be illegal. A man wearing a toga with purple trim, to which he had no right, could be prosecuted for presumption. The visual hierarchy had to be maintained. Society needed to be readable at a glance, each person's place immediately apparent from their clothing. For women, the regulations were different. but equally strict. The asterisk stole an asterisk. A long dress that marked respectability was the privilege of married, freeborn women. Former slaves, prostitutes, and women convicted of adultery were forbidden to wear it. They wore instead the asterisk toga asterisk, which in a woman signaled sexual availability or moral transgression. The same garment that proclaimed citizenship and respectability in a man marked a woman as outside proper society. The distinctions extended to jewelry. The asterisk lex apia asterisk passed during the desperate years of the Second Punic War, forbade women from wearing more than a half ounce of gold, or from wearing multicolored garments, or from riding in carriages within Rome, except for religious ceremonies. The law was meant as a wartime austerity measure, but it remained in effect for 2 decades after the war ended. When it was finally repealed in 195 BCE, the debate in the Senate and the demonstrations by women in the streets revealed how deeply such regulations affect daily life. Conservative senators argued that limiting women's adornment was essential to maintaining moral discipline and preventing luxury from corrupting Roman virtue. Women, led by Cato the Elder's philosophical opponents, argued that they had contributed to the war effort through their sacrifices and deserved the same freedom to display wealth as men. The repeal passed, but the episode illustrated how clothing and adornment were never just personal choices. They were political statements, subject to state regulation. Even hairstyles fell under social regulation, though not always formal law. Women's hairstyles, in particular, became markers of status and respectability. During the late Republic and early Empire, elaborate hairstyles involving complex arrangements of curls, braids, and additions of false hair became fashionable among wealthy women. These styles required hours of work by skilled slave hairdressers. Satirists mocked women who spent entire mornings having their hair arranged. Moralists condemned the vanity, but the social pressure to conform to current fashion was intense. For men, beards went in and out of fashion in ways that seemed trivial until you consider the social cost of getting it wrong. During the Republic, most men were clean-shaven. The Emperor Hadrian, in the 2nd century CE, brought beards back into fashion. Possibly, some sources suggest, to cover facial scars. Within a generation, most men of status wore beards. Then fashion shifted again. A man appearing at a formal occasion with the wrong facial hair marked himself as provincial, out of touch, possibly lower class. The expense of maintaining proper appearance was considerable. A toga required regular cleaning by Fuller's professional launderers, who used urine and other chemicals to clean and whiten wool. The process was time-consuming and not cheap. A man needed multiple togas to ensure he always had a clean one available. Poorer citizens often could not afford proper togas and wore simpler tunics, even for occasions that theoretically required formal dress, accepting the social cost. Women's elaborate hairstyles required not just slave labor, but also imported materials, hairpins of ivory or precious metals, false hair from Germanic provinces, dyes and oils from across the empire. Maintaining fashionable appearance could consume a significant portion of a household's budget. Yet, failing to maintain it could result in social exclusion, missed opportunities for advantageous marriages or business connections, and whispered criticism at public gatherings. The Forum, the heart of Roman public life, was a space where appearance was scrutinized constantly. Men conducting legal business, seeking political appointments, or simply maintaining social connections knew they were being observed and judged. A shabby toga, worn shoes, unfashionable hair, these could undermine one's credibility and status. The pressure to present oneself properly was relentless. Public baths, which most Romans attended regularly, created another arena where bodies and appearance were subject to observation and judgment. Men and women bathed separately, but within each gender group, the bath was a semi-public space where social distinctions were on display. Wealthy bathers brought slaves to assist them, used expensive oils and perfumes, displayed elaborate jewelry even in the bathing rooms. Poorer bathers made do with basic facilities and minimal grooming supplies. The social hierarchy was reproduced even in nakedness. Certain professions in ancient Rome carried strict requirements or restrictions on appearance. Clothing was never just a choice. Prostitutes, for instance, were sometimes required to wear specific clothing or hair colors to mark their profession. Actors, despite their fame, faced restrictions on what they could wear outside performances. Gladiators, too, had specific attire. The regulation of appearance even extended to death. Funerals followed strict protocols regarding dress and display. During the Republic, noble families displayed wax masks of ancestors in processions. These rites were fiercely guarded. Attempting to display images without legal claim was prosecuted. Even the dead had to appear according to their status. Children's dress clearly marked their social position and legal status. It was a visual identifier. Boys, around 16, ritually set aside their childhood toga and bulla, assuming the plain toga virilus of adult citizens. Girls transitioned at marriage, exchanging childhood dress for the stola of a married woman. These were public ceremonies. For slaves, dress was simpler yet profoundly significant. Most wore basic tunics, denied the right to wear togas. Some household slaves dressed more elaborately, reflecting their owner's status, but could never wear the toga. The distinction between free and unfree was visually maintained, constantly reinforced through every public interaction. The cumulative effect was a society where identity was performed through appearance every day. Clothing and grooming were never neutral choices, but always statements about one's place in the social order. The morning ritual of dressing was also a ritual of assuming one's role, making oneself legible to society. For modern observers, this level of regulation seems oppressive, but for Romans, it was simply how society functioned. The rules provided clarity, made the social world readable, and established boundaries that everyone understood. Knowing how to dress, how to present oneself, was part of being Roman as fundamental as knowing the language. Each morning, across the vast empire, millions made themselves presentable according to rules they followed, creating through their collective compliance the visual texture of Roman civilization, a truly unique aspect of their daily life. In 161 BCE, the Roman Senate passed a lex fania, limiting spending on dinner parties. On ordinary days, a host could spend no more than 10 asses per meal. On festival days, the limit rose to 30 asses. On 10 specified days per month, 100 asses were permitted for lavish feasts. The law also restricted fattened fowl, only 1 hen per meal, and it could not have been artificially fattened. This was not mere guidance, but enforceable law with penalties. The state believed excessive spending threatened moral fabric. From dinner guests to ingredients, even how chickens were raised, all fell under governmental regulation. The lex fania was one of many sumptuary laws, which aim to control luxury, prevent ostentatious wealth, and maintain social distinctions. These laws also preserved most traditional Roman values of frugality and restraint. Their repeated passing suggests ineffectiveness. Their enactment reveals deep anxieties about wealth, status, and social order in Roman society. Dinner parties were central to Roman social life, especially among the elite. Invitations and seating held great meaning. The quality of food and entertainment reflected a host's status. A successful party could advance careers and cement relationships. Under pressure, hosts competed with increasingly elaborate meals, multiple courses, exotic ingredients, rare wines. Terrorists mocked peacock brains and fattened dormice, testifying to the commonness of such extravagance among the wealthy. Sumptuary laws tried to curb this, but enforcement was difficult. Dinner parties were private affairs. Lest someone reported a violation, authorities wouldn't know. Penalties were often modest fines, easily absorbed by the rich. Laws were easily evaded. The lex fania limited spending, not courses. A creative host could serve many inexpensive dishes. Expensive items could be claimed as gifts or officials bribed. Later laws even addressed this common practice. The restriction on fattened fowl highlights the specificity of Roman regulation. Artificially fattened birds were a luxury. Inspectors could theoretically examine chickens. The image of officials inspecting dinner party fowl has an absurd quality. Beyond food, sumptuary laws regulated gold and silver plate, furniture value, and elaborate decorations at banquets. The goal was practical, preventing bankruptcy, but also moral. Excessive luxury was seen as corrupting Roman character. Women's clothing and jewelry were also targets. Laws restricted gold weight, fabrics, and garment colors. Tyrian purple, an expensive dye, was reserved for the highest ranks. Wearing it without right was a false claim to status. Restrictions on women's adornment were justified to prevent husbands from bankruptcy due to luxury demands. Women's desires were seen as insatiable. Women's views didn't factor in, but protests during the Lex APA repeal showed they could advocate for their interests. Funerals were also regulated. Aristocratic Roman funerals were elaborate, with processions, mourners, musicians, and speeches. The expense was ruinous. Laws limited musicians, mourners' clothing, and spending on funeral feasts. Even grief was regulated. Laws specified funeral participants. Professional mourners hired to wail were restricted or banned, seen as excessively emotional. Repeated laws suggest families still hired mourners, valuing emotional expression over legal compliance. Gladiatorial games and public spectacles also faced regulations. Private sponsors were limited in spending and event elaborateness. This prevented rivalry with imperial spectacles and bankruptcies. Spending a fortune on games meant losing long-term family support. Wedding celebrations were also regulated. Laws set limits on guests, feast expenditure, and gifts. Roman weddings were complex. Legal compliance added to family politics, social obligation, and religious observance. The carrying of litters, covered chairs by slaves, was restricted to certain classes: women, sick people, and magistrates. Healthy adult male citizens generally could not use them to encourage physical fitness and prevent effeminacy. During the empire, litter use became more common, but remained a visible marker of status, signaling rank and wealth. Even children's games were subject to social regulation. Boys were encouraged in physical games for martial skills. Excessive intellectuality was viewed with suspicion. Girls were steered toward games, preparing them for household management. The irony? These sumptuary laws were passed by those most likely to violate them. Senators legislated restraint. Magistrates enforced restrictions, yet came from families prominent through conspicuous consumption. The laws represented an ideal of Roman virtue, honored in principle, but often ignored in practice. Yet, laws continued to be passed, serving as statements of values and assertions of proper behavior. They provided a standard to judge excess, even if routinely violated, criticizing social climbers and the newly rich. For ordinary Romans, these laws were largely irrelevant. The shopkeeper couldn't afford to violate them, but the laws reinforced social hierarchy, making clear certain displays were reserved for their betters. The cumulative message: consumption was a social act with moral and political dimensions. What you ate, wore, or how you celebrated was not private. It maintained order and hierarchy. Whether these laws achieved their goals is doubtful. Roman society grew more luxurious over time, but the laws remained, a reminder that official Roman values emphasized restraint, even as behavior moved opposite. The Roman calendar was not simply a method of tracking time. It was a complex system of religious, legal, and social obligations. Certain days were dies fast when legal business could be conducted, courts could sit, and contracts signed. Other days were dies nefaster, religiously unlucky days when legal proceedings were forbidden. Still others died commercial days when citizen assemblies could meet, and numerous festivals were scattered throughout. For an ordinary Roman, navigating this calendar required constant attention to avoid wasted effort or violated taboos. The market days, called nundinae, occurred every 8 days. Farmers came to Rome to sell produce and buy goods. These were also designated for legal business, making them particularly busy. Missing the proper day meant waiting weeks. Religious festivals filled the calendar with bewildering frequency. Romans were meticulous about honoring their gods. Many festivals required specific actions from specific people, like the Vestal Virgins tending sacred flames. The Pontifex Maximus had to perform certain rites, and citizens might participate in processions or observe holidays. Some festivals were joyous, like Saturnalia in December, when social rules were suspended and gifts exchanged. Others were solemn, like Parentalia in February, when families tended ancestral graves and performed rites for the dead. The calendar's complexity created opportunities for those who understood it and problems for those who did not. Professional calendar experts, religious consultants, could be hired to advise on the most propitious timing. The Roman calendar itself was flawed, based on a lunar cycle but attempting to track the solar year. It required periodic intercalation, adding extra days, decided by the College of Pontiffs, who manipulated it for political purposes. An election could be moved, a magistrate's term extended. The calendar became a political tool. By the late Republic, the calendar was so misaligned that Julius Caesar undertook a major reform in 46 BCE. His Julian calendar brought stability, but 46 BCE had to be 445 days long to realign it. Known as the Year of Confusion, even after Caesar's reform, the calendar remained dense with obligatory observances like the Calends, Nones, and Ides. The Ides of March, when Caesar was assassinated, was originally a festival of Jupiter, making the act an additional sacrilege. Emperors' birthdays became mandatory public festivals. Failure to participate could be interpreted as disloyalty. Under paranoid emperors like Domitian, insufficient enthusiasm about imperial celebrations could be dangerous. The Dies Parentalis days honoring deceased family members required Romans to visit tombs and leave offerings. Neglecting these duties was believed to anger the spirits of the dead and bring misfortune on the family. Fulfilling them required time, resources, and often traveled to burial sites outside the city walls. Certain professions had their own festival days with required observances, not optional social gatherings. Missing them could result in social censure and risk divine disfavor on one's livelihood. The agricultural calendar imposed its own rhythms and obligations, particularly on rural populations. Certain days were designated for specific farming activities, religiously sanctioned, like beginning the grain harvest. Even daily activities were subject to religious timing. Romans divided each day into hours. Business was typically conducted in the morning, the main meal in the afternoon, and evening for entertainment. Deviating too far from these patterns marked one as eccentric or foreign, highlighting the pervasive influence of Roman customs. The Roman week, unlike ours, had 8 days. The nundinae marked the end of one week and the beginning of the next. When the 7-day week was adopted from the Eastern Mediterranean, it created confusion as the systems overlapped. By the late Empire, the 7-day week with planetary names became standard, but both were tracked simultaneously. For slaves, the calendar meant something different. Most worked regardless of festivals, with few exceptions. Saturnalia was exceptional, offering reduced duties or special rations, even masters serving slaves in a social reversal. But this was rare. The calendar's religious and legal complexities were primarily concerns of citizens. Children learned the calendar as part of their basic education. Knowing dates and festivals was essential. Errors could have serious consequences, from missing appointments to accidentally violating religious law. The calendar also shaped economic life. Loans and debts were calculated from specific dates, but if the calendar was manipulated by intercalation, the actual time between dates could vary. This uncertainty added an additional element of risk to financial transactions. Public works, military campaigns, and governmental business all had to be scheduled around restrictions. The season for warfare was traditionally from spring to autumn. Winter campaigns were rare. In the campaigning season, certain days were more auspicious. Generals consulted augurs for omens. An army might delay an attack for days, waiting for favorable omens, giving enemies time to prepare. Theatrical performances and gladiatorial games were scheduled according to religious festivals. They were not mere entertainment, but part of religious observances honoring specific gods. The state funded them as duty to the gods, not primarily to entertain citizens, though entertainment was a side effect. Even death was subject to calendar considerations. Certain days were more or less appropriate for funerals. The Dies Parentoles in February was for honoring the dead, a particularly appropriate time for memorial rites. But certain other days were inauspicious for burials, requiring families to wait or conduct abbreviated ceremonies. The cumulative effect of these obligations was a life structured by external, temporal frameworks. It's difficult for modern people to appreciate. We think of time as neutral, scheduling activities by preference. Romans experienced time as morally and religiously charged, each day carrying its own character and prohibitions. This was not oppressive, but simply reality. The calendar provided structure, marking the rhythm of the year. It connected individuals to their community through shared observances. It was predictable in its unpredictability, but it also meant spontaneity was limited. Significant activities had to be planned around constraints. Life moved according to rhythms established by religion and custom, rhythms no individual could alter. The Roman relationship with time was fundamentally different from ours. We manage, optimize, fill time. Romans experienced time as something already filled, structured, laden with obligations. They lived within time. Each day began with the implicit question, what kind of day is this? What can be done? What is forbidden? The answer determined everything, governing the rhythm and texture of their lives from birth to death. The streets of Rome were not neutral territory. They were regulated, contested, hierarchical spaces where one's right to be present, to move freely, depended on status, time of day, and activity. Simply walking through the city required navigating an invisible map of permissions and prohibitions, obvious to natives but bewildering to outsiders. Wheeled traffic was banned from the city center during daylight hours, with few exceptions. This law, attributed to Julius Caesar, prevented constant collisions. All goods for Rome's million inhabitants' food, building materials, fuel, merchandise had to be transported after dark. Roman nights were far from peaceful. Carts rumbled, iron wheels clattered, drivers shouted, animals added their sounds. Juvenal complained the noise made sleep impossible. The wealthy installed heavy shutters and thick curtains to muffle the din. The poor, in upper floors of apartment buildings, simply endured. Even during the day, streets were ordered by invisible rules. The right side was for predominant direction. Higher status had priority in narrow passages. A senator in his toga expected the street to clear. A man in working clothes scrambled out of the way. Women's movement through public space was constrained. Respectable women did not walk alone, accompanied by slaves or family. A married woman walking unaccompanied through certain districts might be assumed to be a prostitute, regardless of her actual respectability. Certain areas were off limits to respectable women at certain times. The public baths during men's hours, certain taverns and shops, the theater and amphitheater, where women were restricted to upper sections away from the arena. These restrictions were enforced through social pressure, through assumptions, and the real possibility of harassment. Prostitutes occupied a peculiar position. They were ubiquitous, yet socially invisible, soliciting in doorways and specific streets. The law required them to register with authorities and to dress distinctively, the toga for women being one such marker. Public fountains were another regulated space. Rome's aqueducts provided water to numerous public fountains throughout the city, free for anyone to use. But the fountains had their own social hierarchies. Certain fountains were known to provide better water. Slaves sent to collect water for elite households had priority over ordinary citizens. Fights over position in line were common. The Forum, Rome's central public space, was the most carefully regulated of all. Different areas were designated for different activities. Tesa, the speaker's platform, could only be used by those with legitimate public business political speeches, announcements, legal proclamations. Attempting to speak from the rostra without authorization was both legally prohibited and physically prevented by officials. Even sitting down in public spaces was regulated by status. Stone benches around the Forum were available. Working men did not sit on benches during business hours. That was the privilege of citizens with time to spare. Slaves, generally, did not sit in public at all, unless waiting for their masters and clearly in a position of service. The grain dole, one of Rome's most important public services, was distributed at specific locations on specific days. Citizens entitled to the dole had to appear in person to claim their monthly allotment. The distribution points became scenes of massive crowding. Public latrines were available throughout the city, but they offered no privacy. Multiple seats were arranged side by side, without partitions. There were social spaces where men conversed while attending to bodily functions. Status distinctions persisted even here. Religious processions had priority over all other uses of public space. When a procession was scheduled, streets had to be cleared. Shops along the route closed. Normal traffic ceased. People lined the streets to watch, maintaining respectful distance. Disrupting a religious procession was a serious offense, potentially sacrilegious as well as illegal. Funerals claimed public space in similar fashion. Elite funerals, with their long processions, could shut down entire districts. The procession had absolute right-of-way. Traffic halted. Shops closed, out of respect. The funeral announced not only a death, but also the family's status and influenced their ability to command public space was a demonstration of power. Markets were designated in specific locations and operated on specific schedules. Selling goods outside authorized market spaces and times was prohibited, though enforcement was inconsistent. The law ensured quality control and proper tax collection, protecting established merchants from competition. A farmer couldn't just set up anywhere. Designated market days and places were enforced. Selling outside this system could result in confiscation of goods and fines. Beggars occupied the lowest level of the public space hierarchy in ancient Rome. They were tolerated in certain areas, but actively discouraged or removed from others. Outside temples, where people made offerings and felt generous, beggars were common. In the Forum, during important business, they were chased away by officials. Too many beggars degraded a neighborhood. Residents sometimes organized to expel them. Graffiti was everywhere in Roman cities. Political slogans, advertisements, insults, declarations of love. Much was technically illegal defacement, but enforcement was selective. Political graffiti during elections was tacitly accepted, even encouraged by some. Commercial advertisements were tolerated. Obscene or insulting graffiti was supposed to be removed. The city walls were a public dialogue, written in paint and charcoal by anyone bold enough. Street vendors operated in a legal gray area, needing licenses and designated spots. In practice, they appeared wherever crowds gathered, outside baths, near the circus. They sold food, cheap goods, and services to the public. Authorities periodically cracked down, confiscating goods and imposing fines. But the vendors returned as soon as enforcement relaxed, driven by practical need. The streets at night became a different world, difficult and dangerous. Respectable people avoided it. Those who traveled hired torchbearers and bodyguards. Gangs of young aristocrats sometimes roamed, attacking random pedestrians for entertainment. Night patrols existed, but were insufficient to maintain real order. Fire was a constant danger in Rome's crowded apartment buildings, often built cheaply. When fires broke out, narrow streets impeded fire brigades. Obstructing them was a serious offense. Buildings were supposed to have firefighting equipment and clear water access. These regulations were inconsistently enforced, especially in poorer districts. Rome's aqueducts were protected by extensive regulations. It was illegal to divert water without authorization, damage structures, or pollute the supply. But illegal water taps were common, especially among the wealthy who bribed inspectors. The system leaked not just physically, but administratively. Public statues and monuments dotted the city, each with its own protected status. Damaging them was illegal. Using them improperly was prohibited, but enforcement varied depending on whose statue it was and who was misusing it. Imperial monuments were stringently protected. Older Republican statues might be treated more casually. The urban landscape was a palimpsest of power relationships, enforced through varying attention. The cumulative effect of these regulations was a public space never truly public. Access was conditional. Behavior was prescribed. Movement was channeled. Every action announced one's status and was judged accordingly. The streets were a theater where social hierarchy was performed constantly. For those who understood and navigated these rules, Rome's public spaces were manageable. For newcomers or the marginal, they were bewildering and potentially hostile. The invisible regulations created a city simultaneously open to all and restricted. You could walk where you pleased, but only if you pleased to walk where people like you were permitted. Ordinary Romans moved with constant awareness of these invisible boundaries. They knew where they belonged and where they did not. They adjusted their routes, timing, and posture according to circumstances. They navigated not just physical geography, but social topography. The streets shaped them as much as they shaped the streets, creating a population that understood instinctively how to move through regulated space, how to claim their rightful place, how to defer when necessary, how to survive in a city that was magnificent and oppressive in equal measure.